Welcome back to another episode of the Well Off Podcast. I'm George Elmasri, the host, and I just wanted to share a little bit about the guest today, Andrew Hines. We talked a little bit about starting a podcast. So I know I've had a few people asking me about that process, what kind of equipment that we use. We also talked a little bit about the software and the website and setting all of that techie stuff up to make it happen. We talked a little bit about advertising to promote the podcast and Instagram, YouTube, different platforms and video and things like that. So for somebody who's interested in learning a little bit and you don't really have the basics, this is going to be great for you. You're welcome to have a listen. Obviously, check it out. Let me know what your thoughts are. And if you are thinking about investing as well, keep that in mind. There's still a lot of opportunities right now. It's actually a great market to be looking for opportunities. Reach out to me. We can talk about it. I've got a few opportunities in hand right now that I'm working on. So you can send me an email or call me. You can check out the website welloff.ca to find out a little bit more about my contact info. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Well Off Podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. I've got Andrew Hines with me today over another Zoom call. Andrew Hines is a real estate investor and a fellow podcast host himself. Graduated from the Richard Ivey School of Business in 2008 and started investing in 2011 after teaching a little bit at Western University, which I find interesting. I'm actually going to ask you about that. So he's got student rentals, over $4 million in assets, and his goal is to create financial freedom through real estate investing. So, Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Before we get started, I actually want to ask you about that. Your teaching contract at Western University, what were you doing there?
Well, where I went to school at Ivey, they actually have a program. So they run the pre-business program. So Ivey is actually only for third and fourth year, and you start first and second year in the whatever program you're in. You could be in economics, business, psychology, whatever. So I did my first 2 years in a sort of business type stream, and I was minoring in economics. Then I went to Ivey for my last 2 years. And then, but in my first 2 years, I got to take two courses that were designed by Ivey, and they were Introduction to Business, which is like a survey course of all the different types, and then the second year was Financial and Management Accounting.
Cool.
And so they actually, what they do is they actually have fresh graduates teach those two courses. And I thought that was insane when I first found that out, because that was like one of my favorite courses ever, was first year business, learning about marketing, finance, operations, organizational behavior, and then of course general management, which is sort of like strategy. And as soon as I saw that was an option, I was all in. I'm like, this is what I'm doing no matter what. And I taught for 2 years, and then I went into the mortgage business after that. And I actually ended up going back in 2014 and teaching a 1 year contract as well, for 4 sections, which I had a lot of fun teaching. It was, it made me a better speaker. The case method is what Ivy uses. So you read a business case and then you discuss it like a boardroom,
Mhm.
and that was a great opportunity for me to really hone my critical thinking. And that's why I question things so much, because that was
Yeah,
what I was taught to do. That's what Ivy teaches people to do. And then I think it's always been in my nature too.
cool. That's awesome. So good for you for that journey. Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, and maybe a certain memory you have from being a kid?
I grew up in Tillsonburg, or just outside of Tillsonburg, Ontario, and I was born in Tillsonburg General. And my kid, my childhood was very very simple. I lived with cornfields all around my house, or corn and soybean fields, and playing outside, and that was kind of the thing. My parents never really had all that much, but they did all right. And I guess somewhere along the way, where I got into wanting to be in real estate was, I noticed my parents kind of talking about not having enough.
Mhm.
And I didn't like that conversation. I kind of vowed that I'm going to do things different. I'm going to have a lot of money. I'm going to figure that out,
Mhm.
so that I can have freedom and, not have to say those words, or we can't afford it, or what have you. And that's where I got into real estate, because, while I was at university, I saw, man, people are making some serious money off of real estate student rentals. I was seeing my friends living in them, and I'm like, wow, that would replace my dad's income. I was comparing, a couple of properties out in front of the
Mhm.
gates at Western, and that kind of sparked the whole thing down the real estate path for me.
Cool. So you started in was it 2011 where you bought your first investment property?
Yeah, first properties were 2011 and the start of 2012, and they were just single family homes. Um, I uh, I still have one of those. I sold one just in 2019, and then I got into uh, trying to do a development. Didn't work. Bought some properties in the United States. Lost a whole bunch of money,
Wow.
and then I finally figured it out and got into true student rentals, trying to focus on product I could be proud of owning. And
Mhm.
from 2015 to now, that's pretty much been my main focus. And then among other things, getting into doing construction and running my own company there. And that's kind of just all happened. It wasn't something I could have seen in a crystal ball looking ahead, but
Mhm.
it's funny, you find yourself places you didn't imagine you'd be.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, congratulations on all your success to this point, including your podcast. So, I wanted to talk about that today because I think, especially during these times, I'm sure there are a lot of people that are exploring options like starting a podcast or other, um, just putting out videos on different social media platforms and whatnot. Can you tell us about your journey, about starting your podcast, what that was like, and maybe we can also kind of break it down and explain what it takes to start one?
Okay. So I I kept, I would always just talk about real estate. If I was in a social setting, it's like the conversation is going to go to entrepreneurship and real
Mhm.
estate. Like that's just what has always sort of interested me. So just talking about what creates freedom and things like that. So I started with Instagram because I read Gary Vaynerchuk's. Well, I actually listened to it on Audible, but crushing it.
Mhm.
And I realized I needed to be doing more. And I'd been, keeping everything I was doing from everyone. I wasn't sharing anything. Wasn't even sharing photos on Instagram or anything. So started on Instagram, just started building an organic following there. And then I realized that my friend said you should definitely start a podcast the way you like to talk about real estate. So that was where it started. I already had the audio equipment, some audio equipment, because I am a musician, and I've been playing in bands since I was 14 years old or 15 years old. So
Mhm.
I knew a bit about that. I knew I'd be able to do it. So because of my knowledge, it helped me get a really good crisp sound. Normally, I think to get the quality of sound that I've had on my podcast, as you could probably relate, it takes a little bit more of a learning curve.
Mm.
You got to know your equipment, you got to know what you're working with, and usually people who do that have some sort of a background. And I'm not sure
Yeah,
if you do.
I
Uh,
do. Well, it's a
yeah,
little bit different, but I do have a background. I used to DJ.
yeah, exactly. So that's why
Yeah.
right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have the nice mic, and not that you need that, like because they
Mhm.
have really good podcast mics that plug into a USB port.
Yeah.
You could definitely do it, and the information's out there if you're willing to tackle it. But how I did it, like it's all self done, and I would just Google everything, YouTube everything, and people have done videos on how to start a podcast, how to host it. I had no idea, so I had a website, which I reconditioned to be my podcast platform. So I post a blog post, and that's actually what my podcast is, and it goes to all the different platforms. And this was all done just by Googling, YouTubing, and then with my knowledge of how to create the audio, it all came together. And I made my cover myself, the first one, and I even made the second one myself. I paid somebody $25 to design me a logo,
Cool.
and here we are. I think the most important part is getting content out with regularity, good, honest content that you put your effort into is the big thing. And I loved sharing other people's interviews and stories because in part it's a good stepping stone to just being on my own and sharing content. But it kind of takes the pressure off. And then of course you've got cross promotion. You've got somebody goes on your podcast, they promote it, and
Mhm.
it grows the podcast that way.
Yeah, so let's dive into this if you're open to sharing. One of the thing, there's a couple points that I want to touch on. One of them being if you're able to share what podcast equipment you're using.
Sure. So I just went on Amazon and I got an audio interface, a USB
Mhm.
audio interface. I actually originally got the one I've got here. It's a Behringer 4 channel
Yeah,
UMC404HD.
that's the one I use actually.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
the best deal. I mean, I had one of these that I bought back in like 2004 that was not as good as this one, not even close. And this one was way cheaper. Everything's gotten cheaper. Like the mic I've got, this mic was like the cheapest one at Long and McQuaid that they had in stock.
Mhm.
The other ones I've got are similar. They're MXL, I think 880. So I could you could find those if you search them on Amazon.
So those are
Just
condenser mics.
condenser mics, yeah.
Yeah.
So these are powered. I know you're using dynamic mics
Yeah.
there. Yeah, the headphones, just you don't want to go with the cheapest ones, obviously,
Mhm.
but and then lighting's a big one. So
Yeah.
I've got two big light diffusers
Yeah.
that just kind of help a little bit with that regard. But yeah, that's really the basics that you need, and then that USB audio interface. You just got to get Logic, or if you're using a Mac, or Pro Tools if you're using a PC. There's some probably more basic programs than that, but I
Mhm.
just because of my knowledge and having those programs, I just use those.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the audio interface allows you to connect up to 4 microphones, well, the one you're describing,
Yeah.
4 XLR microphones into basically your PC. So your computer will read the signal from all microphones, and you can actually individually control the
Mhm.
volumes.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
That's the
that's
cool
the
thing for like mixing music afterwards. You can record three
yeah,
different, a vocal, a guitar, and a second guitar, and you
yeah,
can play with the volume after the fact. That's the critical
exactly.
part. Right? If you have two different tracks,
Mhm.
if one person's speaking and the other person's too loud, you can lower them down later. So
Yeah.
that's a key part.
Exactly. And personally, on my Mac, I was using originally Audacity to record, which is a free software, and then you can also use GarageBand too if you want to keep it simple.
Yeah, GarageBand works just fine. I've
Mhm.
used it for a couple of things here and there, although sometimes I find glitches with both those programs. Just depends on the day.
Yeah, exactly. So next up, well, actually, let's talk about your cameras because you have pretty cool, like you have a pretty cool setup where your individual guests have their own cam. Well, you have a camera on you, and then your guests will have a camera
Hmm.
on them, and you're able to piece it all together. I guess you edit it after the fact. Can you talk a little
Right.
bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I have a Nikon D5600 that is used for my guests, and I just bought like same thing on Amazon. I bought a permanent power supply, so it goes in the battery pack holder, and it plugs in. So for $25 or $30 or whatever it was, I never have to change a battery on that thing. And since it just stands there in front of me and records, you don't want to be going through that. So yeah, that's the one. Although those have a 30-minute limit on them, so
Mhm.
that's you got to deal with it. So I actually have to. You never really notice it in my podcast, but I restart the cameras. I just say, hey, one
Yeah.
second. I just restart that. The other one I've had since 2010. It's just like a regular. Um, it's a piece of junk. It's just a
Yeah.
camcorder. I use that one for me. It's nothing special, but I like to make sure my guest gets the
Mhm.
really good angle. Um, and then how I do that is I use a program called Final Cut Pro. So after I export my audio out of Logic, I actually use Final Cut Pro, and I throw in my camera first. So that's the bass track. And then I throw the guest camera on top, and I line it up based on sound waves. So I line the two tracks
Mhm.
up so that they're identical. And then I chop them up. I have a helper that helps me with this, chop them up so that whoever's speaking, the camera is on them. and uh, and the same thing with the audio. My process is very very painful.
Yeah.
It takes forever, but it really does show in the quality, and I know that it's an investment in the quality, I suppose. But
Mhm.
I shut off the mic for the person who's not talking, and that takes forever
Wow.
on an
Yeah. Yeah.
episode, but it makes a difference. It gets rid of boom, it gets rid of echo. I mean,
Mhm.
on Zoom sort of has that technology to cancel it out, so it's actively doing that. Whereas what I'm doing is I'm doing it after the fact, so there is an investment of time in that for sure.
For sure. Cool. All right. So all in all, your equipment, what would you say you paid for to get started, or what can someone expect to pay if they just want to get started?
Well, excluding the computer, I would think that I probably got $1,500 of equipment here
Hmm.
right now. Not, I don't think you need that much. Like you could just get a pair of headphones and a basic USB
Hmm.
mic and use your webcam if you're getting started. But if you like, because I do in person
Yep.
podcasts up until the craziness that is the world right now, um, that's why I had that set up.
Yeah. And I would go and say I do it in person. I think originally when I started, my setup was under $500,
Mhm.
excluding the laptop. So I think you can probably get somewhere around there. And there's
Sure. Yeah.
actually there's these kits that you can buy on Amazon. I think they're like little podcasting kits
Mhm.
that are like $150 if you really wanted to go with entry level stuff.
Yeah. Like this
Yeah.
mic, well, I have three mics here, but I mean, this
Mhm.
mic is like 80, $90. The arm is the expensive part. This arm is like 130 plus tax. And
Mhm.
then the interface is, I don't know, I think they're like 180 now.
Mhm.
I mean, those three things, really, that's all you need
Yeah.
to start. And then plus your headphones, but you could use earbuds to start. So if you're just doing Zoom or whatever, then that's good. Then if you want to get into the cameras to do multiple angles, you could just go get junky old used camcorders and use
Mhm.
the two. The software, like again, you can use Movie Maker, iMovie. Um, they're not as good, but it's yeah. I think you have to decide, right? If
Mhm.
you're planning on being in it for the long haul, you get good stuff.
Yeah.
If you're just getting started, you can work up. You can work up to it, right? You start with something basic, and then as you get better, you keep upgrading your
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, the key, like you said, is just being consistent, constantly putting out content. The worst thing you can have is somebody who posts like 6 podcasts and once per week and then goes
Mhm.
6 months without posting anything.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've really tried to be consistent every Sunday to
Mhm.
release, and for the last 6 months, that's been the case. And before that, it was like I was doing like crazy, and then I had a big lull, and then I got married in the summer, and I
Yeah.
had a whole month and a half off. So you don't want that. You're right. You want to be
Mhm.
consistent, and I think like there's a lot of people now that they'd be a lot better off just given the whole. And I don't know when this will air, but I'm assuming we'll still be in some form of craziness at that point. But given the whole COVID situation, it kind of makes a lot more people sitting at home consuming YouTube videos. So I think there's a big opportunity right now
Mhm.
to really make a push on YouTube. Huge opportunity with all these people sitting at home to start making some content and getting in people's face more. Rather than let this time go to waste, connect with people now and then carry those connections as we come out of this.
Yeah.
That would be my first thought there.
Cool. You touched on this a little bit. You talked about repurposing your website for the podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about that and just describe the media host that you're using?
So I'm hosted with Bluehost. I think my
Okay.
domain is with them as well. And these are all things I just learned because trying to do stuff. I've got a WordPress site
Okay.
and I use, is it Blueberry? I think it's Blueberry plugin in WordPress that sets this all up. So a lot of it's automated for you. It's really not it's not that hard if you can follow instructions, do a Google search, and just follow a process. So what I would say is there is a how to start a podcast series on YouTube that I followed, and I said host a podcast through WordPress or something like that. That's how I searched it.
Mhm.
Because that's how I wanted to do it. So my WordPress blog article is actually the show notes, and the way I liked the way that all worked. So if people go to my website, they can actually see the podcast, with a video link, with the links to iTunes and all that stuff. So it's just a nice way of being able to organize it. But plus, when you're on actual iTunes, that's the notes that are in that the show notes there.
Cool. That's a huge benefit because my podcast or media host
Mhm.
is Libsyn, Liberated Syndication. The cool thing about them is that I just upload the podcast and it'll shoot it out to all the different media like Spotify, iTunes, whatever else.
So that's a lot more
However,
done for you, right? That's done for you.
yeah, it's all automatic. However, it does not post the video on the website,
Mhm.
which is a cool benefit of yours.
Right. I'm not sure if it's worth it or not. Like
Yeah.
I know another guy who's starting a podcast at the same time. I mean, completely different topic matter, but he blew up into one of in his category, one of the world's biggest podcasts, and he was doing it the way you're describing it. So
Mhm.
it's you're doing a video version. It's totally fine for people to do what you're doing because it's a lot easier than what I do. I just already had the website. I wanted to do it this way. But you could just do it exactly what you've described. So that goes out to all the services. And then if you got the YouTube version as well, then there you go.
Mhm. Cool. Um, so in terms of organizing your guests, having guests come on, how are you doing that? Are you personally reaching out to people or do you have someone helping you? How do you book a time? Are you manually doing that or are you using some sort of tool?
That's where I need to up my game. So generally speaking, what I would do is I would try and book at least 2 months out. I would basically book towards the end of the month. I'd pick a day and I try and do 1 or 2 days in a week towards the end of the month every month, where I would record 5 episodes or what have you, 5 or 6. And that's how I kept my bank of episodes up so that I could just start editing them and releasing them once a week, and I kept ahead of it. But now things have obviously changed. But no, I didn't have a specific booking software that I was using. I know you do; it's pretty slick, and
Mhm.
I need to start doing that. But what I was having is I would have people reach out to me. That was a big part of it, and I would just book them in. I still do get people reaching out to me, and then of course, time it's me, talking to somebody or at a meetup or something, and saying, "Hey, you know what? You should come on the podcast," and then we book it in. So
Mhm.
it's I'm pretty pretty social in the real estate scene, and I try and when I host my meetups, I was getting we had up to 100 people come out, so it's a good opportunity to meet fellow investors and find people who are interested in coming on. But now there's a new opportunity that we're inside and we're doing these via Zoom. Is now I can get people who would never have been able to come on the podcast, live in like Vancouver or Alberta or whatever,
Mhm.
and now there's an opportunity to get a lot more people on. So um, yeah, I've run out of in-person episodes, so my next episode will be a Zoom
Yeah,
episode.
yeah,
But yeah, now it's time to refill the bank with episodes for sure.
cool. And what about promoting? So you've done pretty well. Your podcast, your audience grew quickly. Can you tell us about how you
Hmm.
did that? Were you promoting? Was it just natural growth? What'd you do?
Instagram was a big part of it. So I would do teasers, and this was so much work. Like, guys, this is just so much work. I had to be completely blunt about it, but it was worth it at the time. And if you like doing it, it's not bad. So I would create these teaser videos, 1 minute teasers, and basically that's what I would use to hook people. And then I'd have a thing at the end of the teaser video saying full episode in my bio, and I was able to drive a lot of traffic to the podcast early on using those. And then it was just people telling people, people come to the meetup, those people find out about it, they find out, they tell their friends, and it just grows organically. So I think if you're putting out good content consistently, that will just happen. That's naturally
Mm,
going to happen.
okay. And are you asking your guests to promote it? If so, how?
I've been doing that more. I probably should be a lot more annoying about that, but yeah, I'll ask. So in the beginning of every episode and at the end of every episode, usually, at least at the end now, I say, thanks for listening. Could you please rate and review? Could you please share it with somebody it would help? And just trying to spread that way. I think I've noticed, because people are inside and they're not working and things are not normal right now. I've noticed that my listens have gone down. I know that less people are listening to podcasts, but that makes sense because a lot of people listen to podcasts while they drive. So they're not driving to work. Some people are laid off. It does change things in that sense. But that, I bet you, conversely, a lot of people have seen YouTube views go way up. So two sides to that. So I haven't seen as much growth recently for obvious reasons, but it was consistent. Yeah. And then just getting on other podcasts was a big thing. Constantly just trying to find ways to value add to other people and then take opportunities to go on other podcasts. And that's a great way of cross pollination, where you can grow your brand, they grow their brand, everybody wins.
Right. When you're doing your podcast, are you, or even on your website, are you creating any sort of offer that people can take advantage of, where you're able to maybe collect your listeners' information and connect with them at a certain level?
Yeah, that's something, again, right before everything blew up. I was just starting. I just put I have like a cash flow analyzer I built in Excel. I'm always kind of tweaking it and making it better. So I just figured, hey, why don't I just share that, because that's what I use to evaluate properties, and I'm sure it would help a lot of people. So I offered that at the end of a presentation that I did, and had a bunch of people just go to my website and download it. And it was a way of grabbing an email address and a first name. Not that I've sent any emails since. It is on my to-do list to kind of do a recap of what's going on, and how my take on the current situation in the market and what's happening,
Mhm.
because a lot of people are kind of concerned and scared right now, and there's tons of opportunity. For me, it's just been like, I'm still busy with working, plus doing the podcast, and that's been the challenge for me. Is there's a certain point of like overwhelmed where I've got so much going on. Definitely the podcast is a huge extra thing for me, but it's also built me a huge amount of credibility from a real estate investing standpoint. Being able to attract partners, should I ever want to do that, I think a lot of people will already know me, which is a huge benefit, because they know how I think. They feel like they know me because they listen to me in their ear, or they watch my videos, or what have you.
Awesome. What's your vision for your podcast? How big do you want it to get, and how do you plan on getting there?
So my original vision was to become a Canadian real estate icon. Um, Tough to measure, but I'll know when I get there. So becoming a Canadian real estate brand, right? I mean, I think when people think Canadian real estate icons, it's a lot of the HGTV guys, Scott McGilvery. I think, is Mike Holmes Canadian?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So those kind of guys, that Dex guy, I forget his name. I've actually met him before. I've met Scott before too, but so there's a bunch of icons sort of in the space, and for me, I just wanted to be there. Because I enjoy talking, I enjoy teaching, and um, but I wanted to be. I never wanted to be hypocritical about it. I wanted to be a person that says it and does it, and it speaks my mind, it speaks truth, and I think that that's very refreshing. That's why we see today more than ever, with so much distrust for mainstream media in general, that podcasts and social sharing are so much more prevalent, and so much more valued, because it's real. It's so real. Like, it's just like what do you get out of doing what you do? Like, you obviously get brand awareness, you get clients probably coming to you, but the only way they're going to come is if you just share value. And I just love that notion that we can all add value and speak truth to each other. So my
Yeah.
goal, yeah, long-winded, my goal, definitely still want to take it to real estate icon. I just, I know it's off topic for this podcast. Like, Canada has just been flipped on its head with this current situation. It's like, what's heads, what's tails right now. Everybody's scratching their heads.
Mhm. Awesome. I think we covered quite a bit. Is there anything else that I may have missed about starting a podcast or growing it, or anything we may have missed touching on?
Well, I mean, if you're specifically talking to podcasts, I don't think so. I mean, I would say that if you're reaching out to people to come on your podcast, if you're concerned, like, a lot of people are like, what would I talk about? How would I add value there? It's the easiest thing is to just ask other people to come on. Ask them the questions you're curious about, because if you have that question, somebody else will too.
Mhm.
And that's how I approached it. I'm like, I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. So my first episode was, a 30-minute rant of me just talking about real estate and why I got into it, how I approach it, and all that. And everything after that was pretty much just me asking questions and giving little anecdotes throughout, that were just me being me. And I think that as long as you do that as a podcast host, and you're genuinely interested in your guests, and you let them share their story, I think that you'll do just fine.
Cool. I like that. Yeah. So we touched on pretty much the equipment that you would be using, or if you just wanted to get started. We talked about the software that you use to record, and also to edit your podcast after it's been recorded. We talked about your media host, how you do it, and yeah, we talked about how to get guests on, and just covering all the basics. So the next thing would be maybe advertising. Have you ever thought about doing Facebook ads or anything, or Instagram ads, anything of that sort?
I have, and I definitely should have, because I mean, the opportunity, like, an audience is just so valuable. I don't think people realize how valuable an audience really is. I know Sarah Etter, if that name's familiar to you. I know Sarah
Mhm.
is selling courses now. She's obviously not one to hide that she's looking for JV partnerships, and of course, I think that that's all come through her following through her Instagram. Just constantly putting out that quality. And whether you put out the quality on Instagram or YouTube, or on your podcast, or all of the above, the audience that trusts you is so critical. So the long-winded answer to your question is I definitely should have, because if you can price a course, or I don't know what she's selling hers for, several $100s, if you spend $20 a week on advertising, and that brings you know a sale a week, well, that's a no-brainer. If it costs you $100 a week and it brings you $500 variable profit, that's a no-brainer. And it was really just a timing thing. Like, for me, I was just so swamped with everything that was going on, I just hadn't done that. And it's not a good excuse. I've been needing help for a while, like, to hire. And right before the whole lockdown happened, I was about to hire a full time admin assistant, and my plans changed, and I just decided, no, we're going to keep lean and mean for the moment.
Mhm. Cool. Yeah, especially right now. From I've been listening to podcasts myself, and a lot of people are mentioning that the costs of advertising right now are significantly lower than they were a few weeks ago. So
Hmm.
there definitely could be an opportunity. I personally don't really understand too much about Facebook ads or Instagram ads. I wouldn't want to throw money away, but I think that it is definitely something worth looking into. And for something like the podcast, like you and I have, if we can, like you said, grow our audience, that could be extremely beneficial if we combine it with an offer, or some sort of course or something that we're offering, or
Hmm.
that'll help us get closer to our goals.
Well, yeah, because business is all people with people, right? I,
Mhm.
I know there's so many people out there that rush to the sale, and they're trying to sell something. I've never, to my recollection, sold anything on my podcast. And it doesn't mean one day I won't, but
Mhm.
if I do, people will know that it'll be something of value that I stand behind.
Mhm.
And I think that when you build trust with people, they want the value you can add. If you can put something together that they're going to get value out of, they're going to buy it. And so you got to have a little faith, I think, and I think that comes with maturity. If you've kind of been down that road, if you've done any sales, you know how that process all unfolds. But there's enough good people who are doing a really good job out of about it, that you could follow, and you could get a good idea of how you could do that too.
Exactly. Yeah, as long as what you're offering is truly bringing value, then
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with that for sure.
Yeah, I've had a bunch of people tell me they wanted me to create a bookkeeping course on how to bookkeep for real estate and how to use QuickBooks Online. I know my procedures, because I, not tooting my own horn here, but I think I track really well, and I have a really good process for keeping things organized. That's something that it took me 9 years of being a real estate investor to get to that point. So if I can cut that curve down and save somebody a whole bunch of headaches and time, there's a value to that, and it's really just a matter of putting it together. Have not done it yet. Again, I'm more in like literally consume information mode right now, with the current world situation.
Mhm.
I just consider it very, very important now more than ever, to understand what truth is, what's really going on, and be able to make plans according to. We're real estate investors. We want to know where the market's going.
Mhm. Of course. Awesome. Well, I think I thank you for openly sharing about your processes and all the stuff you're doing on your end. Before we jump into the next section, is there anything you'd like to share?
Well, like I said, I think just like the big one is YouTube. It's a big one to take advantage of right now. If anyone's going to start a YouTube channel, you'll notice that I, start my episodes. If you check out my podcast, you can see my episodes. I start them with just me, talking to the camera like it's my friend. Just looking the camera right in the lens, like I was looking a friend in the eyes, and just saying, "Hey, this is what's going on." Um, I think there's such a market for that on YouTube right now, and if you've got time at home, any camera you've got, the only thing I would say is go on Amazon and get yourself a lapel mic, get something that hopefully you can plug into your camera, and just make your life easy.
Mhm.
But get good audio, and be really close with that camera. And I think that it's a great opportunity now more than ever, with all these people consuming content on Netflix and everything. If you put out content that's entertaining and educational, you could really develop an audience right now.
Agree. And one thing that I really like about what you're sharing is that you don't need to spend $3,000 on a camera and get $500 mics to make
Mhm.
this work, to have good sound quality. You could actually, or good video quality. You could do that with spending significantly less.
Oh
So
yeah,
just work with what you've got. Be smart about it. Ask around for what people are using, and then
yeah.
just go from there.
Yeah, it's like it's easier if you've got a little bit of a budget, but I mean, even my lights, like you can see here what a difference those make because my face isn't dark, right?
Mhm.
Those cost, I think, $99. No, 69
Yeah,
plus
I
tax.
think I know which ones you're talking about
Yeah,
from
yeah, like
Amazon.
yeah, I just threw a couple of bulbs,
There's
four bulbs in
eight
each one.
light bulbs or yeah,
In
4 light
total,
bulbs.
between the
Yeah.
two, I have 8 light bulbs on me right now, and, that makes such a difference. And
Mhm.
then you can get an old Nikon from somebody, or you can get an old camcorder from somebody for peanuts. My camera, I really like it. It's the cheap version of, like, the D750 or whatever, um, D5600, anything, if you can get a 5600, I think that's one of the best value cameras, and it cost me, I think I paid like $800 for it, and the lens was like 200. So yeah, that's not free. That's it. But if you look at my video quality, you'll see why. You don't have to do that. You don't have to start there, but down the road, you may choose to go there.
Exactly. Are you using your camera right now, your DSLR, or are you using
No,
your
no,
webcam?
this is just webcam,
Okay.
but I can see my camera in front of me. That's what I keep looking at.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, cool. Okay, so let's jump into the next section, which is the random five. Just going to ask you
sure.
five random questions. You tell me the first thing that comes to mind.
All
Um,
right.
the first question is, what topic can you bring up at a family gathering to instantly get everyone riled up?
Probably real estate.
Okay, that's what your family's passionate about.
Oh, well, no, but to some degree. Yeah, some of them are, not all of them are. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, cool. Name one thing on your bucket list.
Good question. Um, wow, drawing a blank there. I've always wanted to go to like Fiji, somewhere down there. Um, I think that'd be really cool. I've
Mhm.
never had a chance to see it. So that's one of the things that I've had there. Also, I've been really interested in going to, uh, basically going to some of the Eastern countries,
Yeah,
and doing a little bit of traveling there, which I've, never had a chance to see.
cool. Normally, I wouldn't give my 2 cents on this, but just because it was a random question and I feel like I have to answer it. Personally, I think like probably around maybe 12 or 13, I used to really, really love Kobe Bryant. And I
Yeah.
wrote down on my bucket list that I want to go to LA one day and watch him courtside.
Hmm.
So I remember in, I think 2016, in his last year in the league, I decided I'm just going to go to LA. I didn't get courtside tickets, but I got tickets to the game. And at that point, he was injured, so he was missing a lot of games. But thankfully, he ended up playing maybe like 20 minutes that game or something like that. I got to actually scratch it off my bucket list, and it was one of the coolest feelings ever. Obviously, everyone knows he passed away, but yeah, he was a huge idol of mine, and I'm just so happy that I got to get that done.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it's nice to hear that you've been able to do it.
Yeah, great. Okay, number three. If you could remove something that exists in the world forever, what would it be?
Mainstream media.
What do you mean by that?
um, I think, I just think that, the current situation being the main example of it, it's just, I don't think it's always in the interest of humanity, the way things are pushed. I think that there's a lot of, um, I think there's a lot of fear being pushed right now, and I don't
Mhm,
think it's right. So I think that that's the biggest thing. We don't need fear. I think, fear it leads to nothing good.
mhm,
I think that it's much better if people use their brains, stay calm, and work through things. And I just don't think that that's the angle. So, that'd be one of them. I think I could rattle off a list of a lot, but I think that'd be one of them.
cool. That's a pretty good one, actually. All right, number four. What's the most recent fact you learned that surprised you?
Oh, good one. So, University of Southern California did a study, and this is current situation related. They found that the current virus. I'll avoid saying the exact name, because I think that's better for YouTube. The virus is, actually, they tested 800 people, and out of 800 people, they found that I think just over 4% actually already had the virus because they had antibodies. They didn't even know. And so they had concluded at the end of that study that the actual amount of people that have that virus, going around the world, the virus the whole world is shut down for right now, the actual amount of people that have it is actually 40 times greater than the confirmed cases. That was their conclusion of that study. So I worked backwards on the number. And hypothetically, that means that the death rate on this virus is actually lower than the flu. And again, tying back into my last point with the media, you know, why why didn't the government do that study? Why did University of Southern California have to do that? So, just very interesting fact that I just learned.
Mm, cool. That's interesting. Yeah. I don't know what to say about that. Hopefully, I don't know. I hope it's not 40 times greater than what's being announced, but you never
Well,
know.
no, the 40 times is means 40 times more people had it, but they didn't even know.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's actually kind of comforting, isn't it? To
I
know that
guess
most
so. Yeah.
people aren't really affected. Like,
Yeah.
just dumb that fear down. Like we don't need all that. So, anyways, I know I'm getting off topic here, but
No, that's okay. It is the random five, so you have the right to do that.
yeah.
And the last question is, what success principle do you live by?
Well, a big one is, you become the average of the five people you spend the most time with, and I always try and surround myself with really good, smart, capable, critical thinking people.
Mhm. Awesome. Cool. Well, I think that's it. Do you want to share a little bit about your podcast and also what services you provide, if you do any, and how people can reach you?
Yeah, I think the main thing I'll just stress is that, yeah, if you want to follow the podcast, you can find it on any platform that you listen to podcasts on or watch them at, being YouTube. You can find that just by searching my name, Andrew Hines. If you search Andrew Hines on YouTube, you'll find a motorcycle guy as well, but I'm not him. But you'll
Okay.
find me if you keep looking there. Yeah, just type in Andrew Hines podcast if you're having any trouble. But my last name is Hines. And if you want to reach me on Instagram or Facebook, you can find me at the Andrew Hines.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate it, and wish you all the best throughout this craziness. And I look
Yeah.
forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, sounds good, man. Okay, I appreciate you setting this up.
As always, thank you for tuning in to this episode. I hope you got something good out of it. I wanted to offer you a free report that I've created just for you as a listener. The report is The Beginner's Guide to Real Estate Investing, and hopefully this will help you identify what type of properties, what kind of investment properties would be suitable for you. And you can download it by simply visiting www.welloff.ca/guide. Again, welloff.ca/guide. Enjoy, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.